Okay. Good evening, everybody. Apologies for being a few minutes late. It's 6:45, and I will call the regular session of San Gabriel City Council to order. Tonight, the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Councilmember Liao.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Please rise. Place your right hand at your heart and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Liao. Roll call, please.
Mayor Pooh,
Here.
Vice Mayor Menchaca,
Here.
Councilmember Costanzo,
Here.
Councilmember Harrington,
Here.
Councilmember Liao.
Here.
Okay, great. Next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda order. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any objections? Seeing none, it's so ordered. Next item, please.
Item 2, presentations. Item A, recognition of state champion for dramatic interpretation, Daphne Nia. Presentation will be made by Mayor Pooh.
Okay. So this is somebody that my daughter goes to school with, and her accomplishments have been amazing. So Daphne is an 8th grader at Jefferson Middle School, and she competed in the 9th Annual California Middle School Forensics Speech and Debate State Championship on May 19th. And guess what? She won. She won in the category of dramatic interpretation. There were a total of 595 entries in the entire competition from kids all over California. 52 competed in her category, and only 6 of the 52 made it to the final round. So we have in our midst, I think, somewhere, right? Hey, Daphne. We have in our midst a state champion. Please join me in congratulating Daphne Nia. Yeah, come on up, Daphne. Would you like to show off some of your speech and debate skills and say a few words, or just accept the certificate?
I would like to say that I'm very grateful for the opportunity that I had to compete at the speech and debate tournament, the state speech and debate tournament. And I couldn't have done this without my supportive team members and teachers. And on behalf of the Jefferson Middle School speech and debate team, I would like to say thank you to Mayor Pooh and all of the city council members for this opportunity, this recognition, and for all your support to Jefferson speech and debate team. Thank you.
Awesome. Wait. Don't go anywhere. So, in honor of your accomplishments, we have the Certificate of Congratulations, 2019 California Middle School State Champion in Dramatic Interpretation. Would the council please join me in presenting this to Ms. Nia?
Could everyone slide over, please? Just a little bit. Okay. A little bit closer, please. Everyone ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
On the count of 3, say congratulations. 1, 2, 3. Congratulations. Awesome. Perfect. Thanks, Denise.
Okay, please give Daphne another round of applause. So I mentioned my daughter's also on the speech and debate team, and they put countless hours into preparing and practicing, and then actually even attending and participating in these competitions. So it takes a lot of work to get to where she is now. So next item is the recognition of police volunteer Sue Fitzsimmons. Another good one.
Presentation will be made by Canine Officer Paul Puente.
Presentation being made by Bentley. Yeah, Bentley's the most popular person in the room, or possible sentient being in the room. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, Council and Mayor. I'm Officer Paul Puente, and I'm up here tonight to recognize the hard work and dedication of one of our police volunteers. This person goes above what's expected of them as a volunteer. Just real quick, after she graduated from the police department's first community academy, she signed up as a volunteer and basically assists the front lobby, records, detective bureau, parking enforcement, and administration staff. She volunteers approximately 70 hours a month, saving the department a lot of money. Just to name some of her accomplishments, she's already completed the 24-hour community emergency response team, which is hosted by our very own San Gabriel Fire. She completed the Civilian Law Enforcement Symposium in San Diego to further her training as a volunteer. Completed law enforcement for patrol volunteers through the LA County Sheriff's Department. And on top of all that, with that said, she created and funded our very own canine nonprofit organization called Partners with San Gabriel Canines. Let's see. Basically, she goes around and she educates the public about how our police dogs work, how they're a great asset to the department. And without her, we wouldn't have supplemental funds to help fund for the unexpected medical costs or training or certain classes that we have to attend. So with that said, I would like to recognize Sue Fitzsimmons for all of her hard work to the Canine Unit. And I want to present her with this. There you go, Sue. We really do value you, Sue, so thank you very much for everything you do.
Thank you, Paul.
All right.
Thank you, Bentley.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Would you like to say a few words, Sue?
Mayor Pooh, Denise, City Council. I couldn't do this without all of my, it takes a village. And believe me, out here we have a village of people. I couldn't do it without all of you, especially my partner Paul and Bentley. This has been a great experience for me. We're only beginning. We need a whole lot more funds. And I'm just very excited to be able to do this, not only to work at the police department. It's been a wonderful experience for me. I learned so much. And I feel as a longtime citizen to the community, it's time for me to give back. So I'm ready to give back. Thank you all.
Sue, please wait. Would you allow us the honor of taking a photo with you and the award? And I mean, I think I speak for all of us that you're one of the gems in the community, and the warmth and passion, enthusiasm that you bring to everything that you do, including the setting up, a nonprofit organization, to help fund the canine unit and the expenses that that it has. So really, it's from the bottom of our hearts and the San Gabriel community as a whole. I think that we definitely recognize and thank you.
My pleasure.
that is super heartwarming. So another round of applause for Sue Fitzsimmons. And next item is another great celebration in the community. It's the graduation ceremony for this most recent round of CERT. Sorry, Charles, to make you wait. But we have many members of the community who engage in our community emergency response team trainings. And how long is that? It's like 16 weeks? 6 weeks? 24-hour period. Members of the community learn what to do in the event of a large natural disaster or some other incident in which our own city resources will be stretched thin, and regionally those resources will be stretched thin. So it's a great program, and I'm certainly glad that so many members of the community learn what to do, how to keep the neighborhood calm, and also how to interface then with our own public safety, to make sure that people stay safe and hopefully don't panic and all that. So please take it away.
Thank you, Mayor Pooh, Vice Mayor Menchaca, and members of the council. I first have to state what an inspiration Sue is to all of us. The passion and dedication is unmatched, except for maybe by this next set of volunteers. So once again, it's my honor, and I'm proud to present our most recent Community Emergency Response Team graduates. CERT, as you said, Mayor, is an invaluable program that educates the community, trains community members who have volunteered their time and committed themselves to serving the city and their neighbors in case of disaster. The 12 members that will be recognized tonight have spent 5 weeks on Thursday nights and a Saturday training in disaster preparation, fire safety, utility control, light search and rescue, CERT organization, disaster psychology, terrorism, and in this day and age, unfortunately, active shooter events. There's over 24 hours of didactic and psychomotor training that culminated with a 4-hour scenario on a Saturday where each new skill set was put to the test. This evening, our firefighter paramedic Takahiro Suzuki, who's our CERT coordinator, will have the honor of introducing these new graduates to you. Taka?
Good evening, City Council members, Mayor Pooh, Denise Menchaca. My name is Takahiro Suzuki, and I will be presenting the awards to the 12 newly CERT members for our community. Before I do that, I'd like to recognize a few people: Linda Tang from Finance, Adam Yang, and Jonathan Fu, that has helped me tremendously to get this thing going. Obviously getting certificates printed, getting the word out there on our website, and then getting some forms signed so that I could get money for CERT. So I'd like to recognize them. And then most importantly, not just the 12 here, but behind them, the crew members that you see in the corner standing back, supporting the CERT team. Without the firefighters on the floor, this would not be possible. It's quite a production. Fire safety, we actually train with live fire, as you may know, with extinguishers and different things like that. So these community members are actually getting taught by your firefighters. So I'd like to recognize them as well. And then without further ado, yes,
actually, why don't we go down so we can present the certificates as you're calling the names up, and then
yes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Will
sir.
council join me? Yeah.
Okay, so first up, Chi Ming Wong, but we call him Joe. Sylvia Ramos. Mark Ramos, who could not be here today, but he is going through cancer treatment and is right now going through chemo, but he actually completed everything. So we'd like to recognize him. Greg Palencia. Catherine Gillespie. Annie Sue. Greg Slowinski. Stacy Chen, Thomas Chung, Timothy Chung, Alice Wong, and Cecilia Ramos.
Council, we should stand up on the Council, why don't we come on up?
Yeah, in the picture.
Could everyone please get a little bit closer?
Nobody wants to stand up. Okay, cool.
A little bit closer, please. Could everyone please slide this way?
Slide to the right.
Okay. Everyone ready? Look this way, please. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you all.
Mayor Pooh, I don't know if any other council has ever taken the cert, but I did, and I graduated, and it was a wonderful program. So congratulations to you all.
What was your GPA?
4.9. I don't know. How high can you?
I was going to mention that I've volunteered to do the Spanish version that will be coming up. So I've already committed, and I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, next item, please.
Item D, Upper San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District, State of the District, and Local Water Supply Update. Presentation will be made by District Director Charles Trevino and General Manager Tom Love.
Round of applause. We don't want you to feel left out.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks for being here, Director Trevino and General Manager Tom. So,
yes, I appreciate you being here, members of the council. As I've been introduced, my name is Charles Trevino, and for the last 11 years, I have proudly represented the city of San Gabriel as a director on the Upper San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District. Upper District is a regional water wholesaler for 18 cities and 27 water retailers in the San Gabriel Valley. Population of close to about 1 million residents that we furnish water for. And our primary responsibility is to provide imported water from the Bay Delta through connections with Metropolitan Water District and to help replenish the groundwater. We also take water from the CRA, Colorado River Aqueduct, which some of you have been on that tour with me. And some also have been on a tour with on the Delta. And so we're very happy to have you, and I would extend an invitation to the other members of this council that would like to take advantage of that. I think you'll find it very, very informative. I also serve as a district's representative on the Metropolitan Water District Board of Directors. I am proud to serve in this capacity and actively work to ensure that we have a voice for the San Gabriel Valley and that we receive our fair share of imported water. Recently, there have been questions regarding our local conditions and water supply levels of our groundwater basin. And this is the reason why we're here tonight, to bring that awareness and to educate you on what our groundwater levels are and update you on our conservation and education programs. It is important, regardless of how much rain we've had and how much we've been blessed with that we remain diligent in our daily water use efficiency. And as you will see, our basin level is slowly recovering from the drought, but slowly. We have been in an 8-year drought, so we can't do this overnight and recover completely from that. But I also want to thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and value the support and the relationship that your wonderful city has given the Upper San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District and myself personally. I feel honored and blessed to be part of this community and to represent this community. So without any other further ado, as they say, let me introduce our General Manager, Tom Love, and also like to introduce Nicole Delgado, who is one of our government relations representatives. But let me turn it over to our General Manager, Tom Love. Tom?
Welcome.
Thank you, Charles. Mayor Pooh, members of the City Council, thank you again for the opportunity to be here. So as Director Trevino mentioned, we do supply imported water through Metropolitan Water District, which comes from Northern California through the State Water Project and the Colorado River Aqueduct. And then we have our local water supply, the rainfall, the groundwater replenishment that occurs here in the basin. So I'm going to start from a broader state, western United States picture and bring it down to the local level and let you know where we stand and answer the question everyone asked, are we still in a drought or not? So just quickly on some of the things that Director Trevino mentioned, we cover a large area, almost 1 million people. Each of our directors represents about almost 200,000 people. That's divided into 5 divisions. We were formed in 1960. We were incorporated in 1960 based on a vote at the November election in 1959. So we are coming up this January on our 60th anniversary celebration. One of the big accomplishments this year is we did adopt a new strategic plan focused on these 4 goals. And I'll go from the bottom to the top. Our community representation and engagement, how we interact with the community and elected officials, both on a local level, a state level, and even a federal level, to further the mission and objectives of the district. Workforce and governance between our board of directors and our staff to make sure we have a finely tuned workforce to carry out those objectives. Financial integrity is paramount, and making sure we're effectively managing our finances so that we can provide for the additional water supply that we need here in the San Gabriel Valley. And then bottom line, the top goal is water reliability, water resiliency, water reliability. How can we better manage these water resources? I think we did a tremendous job during the drought, prior to the drought, during the drought, but we don't know when or how long the next drought will be. So we are fortunate here in the San Gabriel Valley. Actually, 80% of our water typically, I'll talk about the last 8 years, typically 80% is from our local rainfall. It falls on the mountains, it falls on the ground, it soaks into the aquifer, the groundwater, and the producers, the water companies that supply water, they have wells that extract that water. So we're fortunate that we have such a substantial local supply, but it's not enough. We do bring in about 20% on average water from imported supplies through Metropolitan Water District. So how does that look statewide? State Water Project, Northern California, great year. 2017 was even a better year, but we're looking at about 137% above average, long-term average runoff in the Sacramento River. The State Water Project allocation, that's the percentage of its capacity that we will get this year, or Metropolitan will get, is 70%. Now you might say, why isn't it 100%? The last time it was 100% was 2006, a year after the wettest year on record. So given the conditions and the environmental restrictions, 70% is extremely good on the State Water Project, so we're very pleased with that. Colorado River, if you asked me this question 6 months ago, I would have told you that we are very concerned that in 2020, the Colorado River system, the 7 basin states, and Mexico, who share that supply, was going to have a good chance of going into shortage in 2020. This year was one of the best years in the Colorado River watershed in 20 years in terms of rainfall and snowpack. The runoff forecast is above average, 124%. That will allow them to add some more storage. Lake Mead will not fill. It's so low, it will not fill this year, but it's a good step in the right direction. So the Colorado River system is looking much better, and that forecast of shortage on the system, they haven't updated the numbers, but everyone thinks it'll drop from a 67% chance of going into a shortage to perhaps below a 40% of it going into shortage, a huge improvement. Let me talk about Metropolitan Water District. Director Trevino represents the Upper District region on the Metropolitan Water District Board. And over the past several decades, Metropolitan has invested several $billions in enhancing their ability to store water. They built a very large reservoir out by Hemet. They have agreements throughout the Central Valley to store water. It's called groundwater banking with other state water contractors that they can extract in a dry year. And they also have established agreements to store their own water in Lake Mead with their name on it that is only for Metropolitan Water District. And so they were able to use this over the past, I'll point to the chart behind you. I can't quite get to that one. But you can see in 2012, Metropolitan had 2.7 million acre feet in storage, the most water they had in storage in their entire history. And it was fortuitous that they had that in 2012 because that was the beginning of the most significant drought we've had in civilized history in California. It was such a substantial drought, and yet at the same time, I would always say that it was a minor inconvenience. We had to let our lawns go brown. We had to reduce our water demands, and this community responded tremendously. I thank you for that. And so we did use that storage throughout the drought. You can see in 2015 that dropped to just under 1 million acre-feet in storage. 2016 was a little bit better, and then 2017, while not that wet here in the San Gabriel Valley, was the wettest year on record in the northern Sierras, which is the primary source of water for the State Water Project. And Metropolitan was able to fairly quickly recover most of that storage. 2018, boom, another dry year. And then this year, both, as I mentioned, in 2019, both in Northern California and locally here, we've done a lot better, and Met will now set a new record for water and storage. Now that's great, it's wonderful, that's what should happen, but as I mentioned before, we do not know when or how long or how severe the next drought will be, but we know there will be another drought. Locally here, this is rainfall. The blue bars show you the rainfall. 0405, the wettest year in about 100 years. Great year, the basin recovered way back then, but that was 14 years ago. And you can see since then the rainfall has been pretty dismal. If you look at the 10-year moving average of rainfall in the San Gabriel Valley, the 5-year moving average, even the 14 moving average, all of those numbers are the lowest average in the 170-year rainfall record in the San Gabriel Valley. Even this year, it did bounce us back up. We were running about 70% of normal on those long-term averages. It brought us up to about 80% of normal. So it's definitely a good year. All that water was captured. None of the water that fell on the San Gabriel Valley made it to the ocean. It was captured in the county facilities and put back into the aquifer. One of the things I like to talk about is the basin. If you think of the San Gabriel Basin, this is kind of a cartoon depiction of a giant bathtub. It's tilted a little bit with the bottom end near Whittier Narrows Dam, and you fill that bathtub. The bathtub itself is made of bedrock, so water doesn't go through that. And you fill it up with sand and gravel, and you pour buckets of water, it sinks right in, and you store that water underground. That's what an aquifer looks like. And we measure it at a key well, which is in Baldwin Park. And so you take that bathtub full of sand and gravel, and you put a bunch of straws in there, and you start sucking out water. That's the wells we use to produce all the water supply in the region. And I mentioned the key well because it's an important parameter we measure in the management of the groundwater basin. This chart shows you the long-term elevation of that key well, the water level underground, if you will. And you can see that 0405, the wettest year in over 100 years, how quickly we filled the basin back up. Then we went into a dry cycle. 1112 was a pretty good year here locally. We didn't quite fill the basin up to where we'd like it, but it did come back. And then that historic drought hit. And we used all that water stored underground, our bank account, if you will, to help meet the water supply needs of the region. And then in 2017, a pretty good year, but we really didn't see the local runoff. And then this year we definitely have, in addition, all of our water companies, ourselves, and Watermaster have invested in buying additional imported water to help the basin recover. And you can see there, starting in late 2018 and this spring, how the basin level is starting to recover. But it's taken a lot of work, a good rainfall year, to get it back up to that level. And so we're still trying to get it back up to what we would consider the normal or healthy operating range. And in order to do that, that's where we need the community's help. In addition to the water we're purchasing, the capture of rainwater, we still need the community's help, because every drop of water that we don't use is water that we can keep in the basin for a future drought year. So we're still encouraging conservation in the San Gabriel Valley. And answering the question of drought, so if you look at the state of California as a whole, no longer in drought conditions. But if you look locally in the San Gabriel Valley in Southern California, we are still recovering from drought conditions, and so continued conservation is essential. So this is a list of our several conservation programs that we continue to do, both indoor, outdoor, and in addition, look forward to this fall, starting with our Waterfest in October. I think it's October 12th. Waterfest at Arcadia County Park. We'll start our 60th anniversary celebration, and it will all be about water education and water conservation. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it. I know I went through a lot of information very quickly. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Questions? Councilmember Leal.
Thank you, Tom. So, we've been working on this big Delta conservation plan, and I know Metropolitan Water has been very engaged with the communities up there, but also about a few islands. My question is, how much water from, now let's take just one single tunnel. How much water will bring into Southern California? What will be the percentage of our total water? And you talk about 20% imported. How much is additional imported water?
Okay, that's a very good question. A little background. We've all heard about the Delta Conveyance System, the California Water Fix. 2 tunnels were proposed. Governor Brown, it was one of his legacy projects. We had a change in governorship. Governor Newsom said something has to be done. Status quo is not an option. But I think 1 tunnel is more appropriate. And so the path, everyone, Southern California water interest, we've jumped on board. We need something done. We know if we try for 2 tunnels, it might just slow the whole process down. So we're pursuing, Metropolitan is pursuing 1 tunnel. 1 tunnel will bring us 6,000 cubic feet per second. Okay. And so that's a lot of water. That's about 12,000 acre feet in one day. 2 tunnels will bring us 9,000. Mm-hmm. So I won't get into the engineering. So we're not losing half of 2 tunnel capacity. We're still got 2/3 of that 6,000 cubic feet per second, which will not be shared with the Central Valley Project contractors because they didn't want to pay for it. So it'll all be the state water contractors. Of that 6,000 cubic feet per second, Metropolitan's share of state water contract is about 40%. So you look at all of the Central Valley, and then Southern California actually has about 70% capacity on the state water project.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Okay. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and educate us, update us on the state of water, and yeah, we'll be sure to, if there's messaging, things like that you want to try to put out in the community regarding conservation. I saw some of the education items up there, then please let them know, send them over, and we'll try to help at least make sure San Gabriel is part of the solution, not part of the problem.
And the community's responded very well, and we're just asking for a little continuance of that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Director Trevino. Okay. Next item, please.
Item 3, public comment. This is the time set aside for members of the public to address the City Council on items of interest that are not on the agenda, but are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the San Gabriel City Council. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the City Council cannot answer any questions or take any action until such time as the matter may appear as an item on a future agenda. In an effort to provide everyone with an opportunity to speak tonight, please be aware that all public comments will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. You will receive a 30-second warning as you approach the end of your time. As a reminder, please be respectful of all speakers regardless of the position they take on any items. If you wish to address the City Council, we request that you please complete a speaker's request card and hand it to the clerk. When speaking, please state your name for the record.
And I believe our city attorney also has a brief announcement regarding public comment tonight.
We have a item later in the agenda, item 6, which is a project preview, Pacific Square mixed-use project. That is not an action item. It's just a preview of a application that's in the pipeline. Council will not be taking any action on it. So if anyone came tonight wanting to speak about that item, we invite you to do so during general public comment.
Which, FYI, is right now. To translate it from the legalese is like, if you'd like to comment on item number 6, which is the preview of the 6A, the project preview for Pacific Square, please do so during this portion of public comment. I don't have any speakers request cards. Is there any member of the public who would like to address the council? Wow, refreshing. Seeing none, I will close public comment. Next item, please.
Item 4, consent calendar. All items listed under the consent calendar are considered routine, and recommendations will be approved in one motion unless a member of the City Council or audience requests a separate discussion. Staff requests that item 4D, adoption of resolution number 19-21, approving fiscal year 2019-20 investment policy, be approved as amended to ensure that the language in sections 9 and 11 on page 5 matches the table provided on pages 2 and 3. The revised page has been provided to council and is available for the public.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Any member of the council want to pull any item? Yes, sir.
Mayor, I'd like to pull item C and item D for discussion.
Okay. Anybody else? So I will pull B and J. Why don't we go ahead with the questions first? We'll go in order. I'll start with item B. Just wanted to note for staff that it appears that there's a page missing in the material demands here, which is voucher list dated 5/23/19. It looks like page 7 is missing, at least in the my agenda materials here.
We'll check the original and get it out to you.
Okay. Is it still permissible to approve even though we haven't seen this page, or?
Well, is it a material?
I don't think it'll be material because the total, vouchers for this particular list is 120,000. But not having seen what those expenditures were, if it's all right with the council and with staff, can we just bring it back to the next council meeting with the complete set of expenditures?
Yes, no problem.
Okay, thank you. And go ahead on item C.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. So let's see, the page, the first page. There is an increase of $901,000 over the prior month. So we have the total cash and investments $24,626,000. So where's that $100,000 additional fund coming from?
It's a combination of revenue received during the month and expenditures that went out. So that's just the amount that we were able to invest over what we had to spend versus what came in.
Okay. And next page, because we have all the CDs account.
Yes.
Yeah, that's including the $7.8 million CD with the Citizen Business Bank. But as I understand, there is a maximum limit for how much we can put into the CD account. I believe it's only 10% allowed. But if you look at compare all together is $10,300,000. That's almost 45%. So it's over the limit.
The current policy says that it is unlimited, the amount that we can put in here. The new policy that's proposed tonight, it states it at 10%. Right now, if you exclude the $7.8 million, we're at 20%, and we are cashing them in, or we're just not renewing them as they mature. Mm-hmm. So we will get down to that 10% and not be over that once we.
So my suggestion, like I said before, maybe we just paid off that 7.8, instead of putting our own money into the bank, and the bank can make 5-6% our own money. And we're actually losing, I'm thinking, maybe just the interest alone, $60,000 annually. So in order to qualify that 10% maximum CD, I think maybe we just pay that $7.8 million off and just reduce the total amount.
Well, we are taking a look at that transaction again. We'll be bringing it back to the council in a couple months. But even without that, we're at the 20%. So as I said, as they mature, we will not renew them until we get down to that 10%.
Okay. All right. Another thing is, instead of investing CDs, is there better investment, for instance, Treasury bill or California municipal bond? Even better, create our own San Gabriel municipal bond. So I don't know if I'm just thinking how we can do a better investment instead of just putting money every 5 years earning 0.5% interest. Or right now, actually, it's higher. But is there a way that we can do a little bit better investment?
The current LAIF rate is almost 2.5%, so it is higher than the amounts that we're getting on our CDs. We will be looking at some of the treasuries that are out there. We recently got our property tax money in, but we also have a lot of bills coming July 1, so we want to make sure that we don't overinvest. So we're taking a look at that, and we'll be looking at things in the future.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, and then did you also have questions on item D?
So actually, item D is the one I just asked, is the 10% maximum for CD accounts.
Correct.
So I already did.
Okay.
Thank you.
My comment here on D, since there's a lot of new language added to the policy, specifically regarding the indemnification provision, section 4. So it provides coverage for the finance director from personal liability, as long as it's acting in accordance with written procedures and the investment policy and exercising due diligence. But normally, when I look at indemnification provisions, usually there's also an exclusion from that indemnification for just simple like gross negligence or willful misconduct. So I was wondering, this is a question for city manager and city attorney, whether that kind of exclusion would be appropriate and or normal, I guess.
Well, I see no problem with adding an exclusion like that, and it certainly is not, it's perfectly reasonable to exclude gross negligence. I'm not prepared to say what's normal in this case, though.
Okay. City manager? And just as a point of reference, I would assume there's some kind of exclusion like that under our D&O insurance. Do we know what that standard is?
Not off the top of my head, but I would assume the same thing.
Okay. Well, I don't want to hold up. I think is there a need to adopt this policy at this meeting?
We can hold it open until July.
So be the concurrence of the council to exclude gross negligence or willful misconduct from the indemnity. Councilmember Harrington?
I just had a question of the purpose of the indemnification. I think would fiduciary insurance on their side be a better approach? Like we purchase fiduciary insurance or require employees that are handling money?
We actually do have a bond.
So what is the indemnity covering then?
It's just a standard language that is in the many investment policies and also the sample policy that's put out by the California Municipal Treasurers Association. So we were trying to get our policy in line with that program.
Okay.
I think maybe the area that this covers is the last part of it, which is where there are deviations from expectations, such as those that we have experienced recently. But I don't want to let somebody off the hook if they were grossly negligent, and obviously if they were willfully conducting misconduct, then that's something that they need to stay on the hook for. Frankly, we should go after them for that. So that's my thoughts there. John, do you have any other further comment?
Well, this is very narrow indemnity because it's only covering security risk or market price changes. So it doesn't actually, it's really, I'm not worried about a CD. I'm not worried about LEAF. All of that. I don't even know why the indemnity needs to be there at all.
It's just there in case we buy a treasury or some type of instrument that is authorized in here, and then rates change and it falls in value.
But I mean, no one's going to expect somebody to know the future. Past performance is not an indicator of future success.
That's true.
I mean, it's the oldest thing in investing. So I don't know what city has ever said, "Oh, you bought a treasury and it went down and you really lost money," and then they try and get after their finance director. We would be worried about negligence and when they're hiding numbers and theft and fraud. But market conditions are market conditions. We can't expect someone to know the future. As long as that approved an investment.
Right. It has not been in there before. I don't have a problem if you want to just take it out and we can look at it again next year when we bring back another revised policy. So if you would like to adopt it tonight without that, I'm just trying to figure out what we would actually cover. We're just saying if the market takes a turn, we're not going to sue our finance director. That's basically we're indemnifying because indemnities for third party, not for first party, typically. In my experience.
That's true, although, we are stewards of the public fisc as well, so, I mean, we have to, we need to monitor those returns on behalf of the public.
I was just going to say, I would like to spend a little more time with that if we are going to include something of that nature, because that's a very serious, statement that we're going to be putting here. I would like to have a better definition. What is gross negligence? Because obviously market conditions no one can control, but I think we're really talking about beyond just the investment policy. So I'm not sure if it belongs here or maybe there's another area we can put that in when we are referring to personnel and gross negligence.
This section here is only for managing city funds, so it is specific to the investment. As I said, if you'd like to strike it out for tonight and take a look at it with next year's policy, there'd be no problem with doing that. And then we could just get it done. And the current policy is for the fiscal year, but with the new year beginning in early July, or the new council meeting early July, it wouldn't be an issue for doing that. But would be happy just to strike the language.
Sorry, I'm just reading the language again, because it is also, from a legal perspective, it's oddly drafted. The grammar and things it makes it confusing. And to Councilmember Harrington's point is, what is it exactly covering? What's the real purpose of it? Councilmember Leo?
Yeah, I think so, because one of the investment that I have questioned. Okay, we never did this before, but I just saw it. It's called the Deutsche GNMA Fund, and it's a mutual fund. As a matter of fact, this is the first time I saw that. I thought, well, is that proper? A mutual fund is ups and down. For the past 10 years, I guess all the mutual funds doing great. Except this one. I don't think this one is doing that great. So. Yeah, just that kind of risky situation.
Okay, I think there's enough of a consensus of the council to approve, but without this section of indemnification in there. So when we move to approve the consent, I'll move with the modification.
I'll second.
Not done yet.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we can do that as well. I mean, I think for both B and D. And then on J, I just had a quick question for Rebecca, if she wouldn't mind.
Good evening.
Good evening. So I'm really happy that we're finally moving this forward, and that we're going to get this playground equipment at Vincent Lugo Park. There's a community member, or a couple community members, who kept asking me about swings and the lack of swings, at our parks in the community. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to ask about that, because I actually have noticed also at other parks in other cities that swings seem to be out of fashion or going out of style. I don't know, is there a legal liability reason for that, or because I do know that when I'm at Marshall Park, where there are some swings. there's always kids on them, and even adults.
I can tell you as a parent, I fought for swings at Marshall Park because I think swings are one of those things that when your kids are too little to be climbing, but you can sit them on a swing and swing them. I
Right.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
We can definitely look into that here. I'm glad you mentioned that tonight. The only thing I can think of with other cities maybe not having them, that swings take up a lot of space. And so the fall zone is huge. You have to have a lot of space around them. It's one of the reasons we did not reinstall swings with the Kaboom project at Smith Park, because that's such a small footprint that
Right.
we didn't want to take that up with swings. We're hoping to ultimately replace the north playground at Smith Park and
Right.
put swings in that area because it's a much larger footprint.
Great.
But we can definitely talk with Miracle about that, and I think that's an easy enough thing to add, presuming, and we definitely, I would say, have the space at Lugo to do it. So I'm
Right.
glad to hear that comment.
Well, I definitely don't want to hold this up.
Sure.
Is it possible to move forward with this
Yeah.
item and then, for the swings
Yep.
at a future time?
We'll look at that.
Okay.
We'll look at that. Yeah, we'll have to see how that works with the purchase of it. But we
Right,
can
and
talk
I know it's
about that.
obviously subject to the availability of funds and so forth.
Yes.
Like how expensive it's going to
Yeah.
be. Okay.
Rebecca, since we have you at the podium, whereabouts, what location at the park is this all going to?
So, and I apologize, I probably should have provided a layout. So if you're familiar with our summer concerts, which I know you've been there at Lugo, if you're at the summer concerts and you are looking at where the concert would be held, which is toward the street side on kind of that west end of the park, it would be, I'm going to screw myself up, it would be to the right of where you are, so kind of
Okay.
behind. So the two picnic shelters that are there, the oak and sage areas, it's nearby that. It's kind of on the north side, if you will, of the dry riverbed.
Okay.
So it'll be more visible, obviously, than La Laguna is. And our hope is that it will be one of those things that when people are at the summer concerts, they would still be able to be at the playground watching their kids play and still be able to hear the music. At the concerts, you all have seen me. I'm there with my children, and I typically end up at La Laguna because my kids want to go play. And when you're over at La Laguna, you almost can't even hear the music. It's so far removed. I've actually been there passing out flyers to people, letting them know about our concerts, and they don't even know that they're going on because they go directly to La Laguna. So it's so far removed. So the thought is that this will be an area where people will be able to have their kids there. Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Sounds like we need a PA over there.
Exactly.
Get around the whole park.
Exactly. Surround sound. I like it.
What, at La Laguna? I guess you're on the board of the Friends, so is that historically accurate? Okay, would it be somewhat closer to the...
Think of the outdoor classroom area. It'll be very close to that, if you know where that is. As part of it's kind of part of the dry riverbed, and then there's kind of that meeting area where there's the signage that shows the different native plants. It's close to that. I can send you guys a map with the layout if that's helpful.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Just for clarification for the public, we will be bringing back the item for the actual contract to install the equipment. So we will make sure to have a map at that point as well. So you'll have another chance to discuss the location as well.
Thank you.
Excellent, yeah. Because I think that if there were a swing set that would be installed, it would make sense to do it all at the same time, because I think we would save money on the construction installation contract. Thank you, Becca.
Sure.
So I'll move to approve. Let's see here. Items A, C, and E through K without modification. Okay, motion and second. Let's go to the board.
Motion passes by a vote of 5-0.
And then on item B, well, there's two voucher lists, so I'll move to approve the voucher list dated 5/30/2019, with direction to bring back the voucher list dated 5/23/2019, with a complete set of pages.
I'll Second.
Motion second. Let's vote on the board.
Motion passed by a vote of 5-0.
And on item D, motion to approve with the striking of current section Roman numeral 4 entitled indemnification. Second. Okay, motion second. Let's go to the board.
Motion passed by a vote of 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Next item, please.
Item 5, public hearing. Item A, adoption of resolutions approving the fiscal year 2019-20 operating budget, capital improvement program budget, amending the 2018-19 budget, and establishing the 2019-20 GAN appropriations limit. Presentation will be made by Interim Finance Director Chamberlain.
Great, thank you. Okay, sorry. Just a protocol procedure. Thank you, Paula. Please proceed.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight you have before you the 2019-20 proposed budget. Topics for tonight include the introduction to the budget, general fund, other funds, capital improvement program, and a conclusion. Looking at our budget at a glance, general fund is $41.6 million, which is 62% of the operating budget. Special revenue funds make up $20.7 million. Internal service fund $4.7 for a total operating budget of $67 million. And a capital improvement program for $4.4 million for a total operating and CIP budget of $71.4 million. A recap of what we've done. We adopted a fiscal sustainability policy, including standards for budget development. We've adopted revised budget balance policy, revised fund balance policy setting the minimum at 17% or 2 months worth of expenses. We've approved guiding principles for the 2019-20 budget. We've officially accepted the annual audit report. We redesigned the budget document to include multi-levels of actuals, year-end estimates, and historical data. More to come next year. Suspended capital contributions to equipment replacement fund. We've canceled transferred CIP projects funded by the general fund. We've included departments in developing conservative, realistic revenue estimates. We have budget requests that are now based on known criteria, and we've limited recommended supplemental requests. Changes from the proposed document. We replaced prospective revenue of $750,000 of possible sales tax increase with the sale of Prop A funds for $682,000. That changes the budget of both general fund and the Prop A fund. We've increased the revenue estimate for fire service reimbursement by $50,000 to match the expense, and increased public works fees by $130,000. We've increased public works net budget by $15,000 for an on-call overtime, and increase the community development budget for some misappropriations for staff development. And then we've removed $255,000 from the CIP funding for a project that was approved on last agenda. So it'll still be in the CIP, but it will not be approved with this agenda. Supplemental request. Every year, the departments come through and give us lists of what they need for ongoing capital equipment or new programs and services. We've included $654,000 of those in the general fund, including the cost of 2 elections, the ballot outreach and additional educational program, and some equipment. We've added over $400,000 of new equipment and $75,000 of grant funding or grant writing services in the special revenue funds, although it does not include over $2.2 million of requests for additional equipment and services maintenance that we just were not able to fund in this year's budget. Some staffing statistics. We have a new comprehensive authorized staffing schedule in your document. Current staffing level is 195 people. We have proposed an addition of 3 people, none of which are funded by the general fund. 2 of them are CIP and 1 of them is within the sewer fund. That takes our authorized staffing to 198 people. We have 11 positions that will be changed, and all of them are just title changes. No additional salary increases for any of them. There's 2 positions that are unfunded, the Mission Playhouse Director and a Management Analyst position in the Finance Department. And then 1 position that is partially funded, the Fire Chief, has been funded for 6 months. As you can see by some of the pie charts, the general fund personnel cost is almost $30 million, and 52% of that is for salary, and then 30% is for retirement, and then health insurance at the 8%. By department, our largest department is Police Department, 35%, 69 people in the department, followed by Fire at 18%, and then Public Works. These are the recommended staffing changes I just spoke about, so I won't belabor the point. On to the general fund. The original proposal to you was $41.6 million. It remains $41.6 million. We have just swapped out the $750 of prospective revenue for the $682 of the sale of Prop A and a couple other changes that we already went over, taking it from a balance of $10,000 to a balance of $96,000 for the fiscal year. So where does our money come from? 58% of it comes from taxes, 22% of it comes from the transfer in from the retirement tax. And then we have the licenses, permits is the next largest group at 6% or $2.6 million. And then the public safety revenue comes in at $1.8 million. The other at 3%, the next largest one of $1 million, includes the $682,000 sale of Prop A money. Again, where our money comes from, all the general fund revenue, taxes are 58%. The retirement tax is 22%, depending upon what graph rounds up or down. And then the second chart over there tells you how much is percent by category. So the largest tax is the property tax, which includes the property tax in lieu of VLF, and then followed by the retirement tax. Where does our money go? As you can see here, the city dedicates most of its money to public safety, with 36% to police, 22% to fire, and 8% to public works. And then the other departments are receive a lesser amount, but are still significantly important to the city. By category, personnel is 72% of our costs at $29.8 million. Operational is $22.6 million. Contractual $3.2. Utilities $864,000. Allocations $3.9. Debt service is $415,000, and then our transfers out are $746,000. As you can see, that the personnel allocations, utilities, and debt service is $35 million out of the $41 million. So only $6.6 million is for operational. That should have a little M next to it, but the only $6.6 million is operational, and that includes some required contracts that we have to have, like the audit and animal control, ambulance billing, those type things that we really can't cut. Taking a look at our fund balance, I know we've seen this one before, but we wanted to bring it back again. Our fund balance requirement at 17% is $5.5 million. Right now we are less than $2 million or negative $2 million. Our 3%, which is our first milestone in June 30th, 2021, we should be at $1 million. And just a little reminder there that as your budget increases, so does the amount that we have to have in fund balance to meet that the guideline. Taking a look, we went back and kind of took a look to see how we got to this point. So we went and looked at our high in 2008-09, and then from down there. So on the right-hand side is kind of a little message of how we got there. From 2009-10 through 2017-18, we expended $22 million on the following things: $800,000 on special projects, $1 million on capital equipment, $16 million on capital improvements, 8.4 net of the loan, and then $4.7 million on operational shortfall, and $5 million of it was in the last 2 years. So we had years where we did have surplus revenue, but it's been offset by the losses in the last 2 years. Major projects that were funded by the general fund is the public works yard of $10.9 million. So we spent $10.9 million on it, but borrowed $7.8 million, so we funded the difference from the general fund. The police facility, $2.3 million of it came out of the general fund. Ace Trench project, $500,000. The stormwater program, $395,000. And then we have done some street projects totaling over $900,000. Moving on to our other funds. We have 24 special revenue funds totaling $25 million. That does include the capital improvement program. And we have 2 internal service funds for $4.7 million. The special revenue funds are $4.9 million in revenue. When we put the development impact fee in there, because it is construction related, I'm sorry, these are transportation and construction related special revenue funds. $4.9 million in the transportation type funds, another $837,000 in revenue for the development impact fund, so about $5.8 million of available revenue coming in for transportation and construction. On the expense side, we have $5.4 million of appropriations and transfers out of the transportation related and $460,000 of the development impact fee fund. Taking a look again on the right hand side where the graph and the little information is, we spend most of the money out of the transportation and construction related funds out of the for CIP, followed by operations, and then the sale of the Prop A funds and some debt service. Out of the operations, that does include Dial-A-Ride for $370,000, recreation transit programs for $30,000, bus shelter maintenance for $90,000, and a bus fare subsidy for $125,000. On the equipment and annual program, that does include sidewalk grinding, pavement marking, wayfinding, street maintenance, sign replacement, and the equipment of a bucket truck and message sign trailer. CAP and capital and special projects funds. These are new funds. We've been using the Fund 122 for years, but it has not appeared in your budget document. It is there this year, and basically it's just a financing method for all the capital improvement programs. It receives money coming in from all the other funds and then completes the project. So we start with a zero balance, we bring the money in, do the project, and then end with a zero balance in these funds. Operational and grant-related funds. We have the Office of Traffic Safety, the Mission Playhouse, Supplemental Law Enforcement Services Account, CDBG, Community Service Activity Fund, and some other grants, all totaling $2.3 million, and we're spending $2.3 million. We do have a deficit balance in that fund. As we have talked about before, is the Mission Playhouse that does need to be covered at some point. Looking down at the bottom of the screen, we have municipal tax-related funds, which is the retirement fund and the sewer fund. I made a little arrow there for the retirement fund. You can see we start the year with almost $1.5 million in fund balance and in with $193,000. So going forward into 2020-21, we may not have sufficient revenue to pay the retirement tax. We did come up with the other solution of being able to draw down from the OPEB trust fund that we have. So that may be an option that you look at for next year, for 2020-21. Internal service funds, as I said, we have 2 internal service funds, Fleet Services Fund and the Risk Management Fund. Risk Management was split into 3 divisions this year, liability, workers' comp, and risk management. $4.4 million for the revenue that comes in from the other funds, and the cost out is $4.7. The difference there is $307,000 of depreciation that we don't make the other departments pay for. And just a little note on the top there, our risk management premiums are due on July 1, so $3.3 million goes out of the bank on July 1, just for those annual premiums. So you'll see your next treasurer's report, your July treasurer's report, will have a decline. Onto our capital improvement program. Our total program is $226 million. It has an approved budget of $33 million. Before you tonight is a proposal of $4.4 million and a release of appropriations of $1.3 million going on from 2021 to 2023, another $52 million, and then beyond 2023, $138 million. So as you can see by the little charts here, our funded is 16% and our unfunded of needs is 84%. Our challenge is to find money to pay for all those needed projects. This is a list of projects. It is in your budget document. It's in the operating budget as well as the CIP budget. And it has, they're all on page 11 on the CIP document, page 4 in the CIP document, page 11 in the operating budget, and I'm sorry, page 4 in the operating and 11 in the CIP. CIP by project category. Our largest category here is streets at 61% of the budget, of the funded budget, followed by the sewer fund of 17%, and then public facilities of 12%. Overall, again, we're adopting tonight, or we're asking you to adopt $4.4 million in total appropriations and releasing $1.2 million, most of it in sewer fund, necessary to release those so that we can afford the sewer projects listed here. So a total increase to the CIP of $3.1 million. And our conclusion. City manager recommendations for tonight is to adopt the 2019-20 budget, the 2019 capital improvement program, the 2019-20 GAN calculation, approve the 3 new positions and the proposed title changes, and then approve the 2018 changes as recommended in your packet tonight, which we had discussed at the last meeting, which is to move projects out of the general fund to other funds to alleviate the deficit. Our work is not done. Our first quarter report, which would be general fund, first quarter data, and a preliminary 18-19 numbers would be October 15th or November 5th. The guiding principles for 2020-21 budget development and the budget calendar would be to you by December 3rd. The 2020-21 budget kickoff would be December 11th, and we would give instructions and forms to staff with a mid-year report and audited financials back to the council February 4th or February 18th. And that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Paula. The next portion of this hearing is first council questions. To clarify anything within the staff report. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. Then we move on to the public hearing portion. This is a portion in which we like to hear from you, members of the public, on the proposed budget for 2019-2020. Is there any member of the public who would like to address the council on what we just seen? I still think somebody out there is hiding their tomatoes and eggs and waiting to throw them at us later. Okay. If there's none, seeing none, then we'll close the public hearing portion and a council discussion. Any other questions? Councilmember Costanzo.
I just have just a comment. Again, Paula, I just want to thank you. The few times I've had to call you about clarifications on things, you've always answered my questions clearly and concisely. But again, thanks for your time and effort in getting us back on track. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor. So, the saying, because for your short time, you can turn everything around from deficit to 0.5 million to 100,000 net. So it's very interesting because I just attend the League of California Cities. So this year we have 200 in the state of California. We have $215 billion, and heaven goes to public education, but we actually end up more than $40 billion surplus. So that gives the rainy day fund $19 billion, but on one condition. So I hope that doesn't affect us, because one condition is if we're hitting the recession, then all the numbers will turn around and we will end up $40 billion deficit. So hopefully that's, we're I don't think we're heading a recession or anyway, but our numbers, our revenues, pretty much like what we are proposed, right? We're not going to see a huge, fluctuation. So pretty much reliable, right?
Right.
That's what
the revenues have been estimated conservatively. Unfortunately, the state won't give us any more of their money when they have a surplus. But I think our revenues are stated well, and unless something really bad happens, I think we should be fine.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your great work. Thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
Yes, I was just going to say, first of all, thank you for making these presentations actually kind of fun. I've never seen budgets with little characters, and you really have to be paying attention, but every time you bring something new to your presentation. So thank you because it's such a heavy topic. It's so serious, and so it's kind of nice to kind of bring a little bit of humor or something else to look at besides just the numbers. But I also wanted to thank you for the time that you've taken in just pretty much revamping. I think this council is tackling issues that perhaps have not been tackled as in depth in the past. There's a common term of kicking the can down the road, but you've really have forced it, and you've good triggers for us to really tackle one by one. For example, the Mission Playhouse. We just had that study session, and I really think the way that you've been able to present the information made all of us realize, it's time to make some decisions. I know we've had ongoing conversations about the CD investment, and maybe that's something we can start talking about later down the road, maybe another study session. But I understand, and I think that's what our council member Lau's been trying to emphasize, that we have so much money tied in CDs, and we have a problem with penalties if we have to withdraw the monies. Correct. And then in the secondary market, treasuries are definitely a much better financial mechanism than CDs, since you have typically higher rates, and it's easier in the secondary market if we need if we need cash immediately. So those are further conversations I hope this council could at least be somewhat involved with, and get your feedback before you leave us, because you had some really good points specifically with our investments, what we've decided to do. You've mentioned about the banks that you've never heard of before, and suddenly we have them in our portfolio. So those are concerns of mine too. But thank you for being so honest and bringing those type of topics that, again, I don't think we've had really deep conversations about, and hopefully we can in the future.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Harrington, you have anything?
Thank you, Mayor. I just had some general comments. I really do appreciate the reformatting, the one-on-one with the council members. I think that helps a lot. That alleviates a lot of the questions that would normally take quite a bit of time. And then just the presentation in general for the public. Now we can, I think this is a much more digestible format, and I like that we can account where the dollars are coming from and where they're being spent without using some forensic accounting. I think this really puts things in a much more transparent manner, and it also shows that it shows the good and the bad. The funding is obviously, we'd like to have more funding. We have some built-in just structural spending that, like salaries, they're just there. We don't have much discretion over that. But I think it really presents the public with what the council has to deal with when we are making these decisions. We do have a finite resource, and this is the best way that we can show the public how we're using that money. So I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. I would definitely echo the comments of my colleagues that the format is easier to understand, and the presentation actually boils things down very, very succinctly. Way back in 2013, when I first was elected, I think I mentioned this before, the budget was presented from a fund analysis perspective, and it was just impossible to follow because it was all 95% of it were just interfund transfers, but you can never tell what was actually, what was the cash position and cash, and as if we were a regular corporation, not just a municipal corporation, one of the most important things is the cash flow, right? And now we can actually finally understand the cash flow a little bit better, and obviously bringing certain practices to light that probably weren't best practices in the past. And I think with the help of Mark and our new city manager being able to have better practices across all departments on budgeting, I think these are all good signs for the future, even though we do have challenges. I have a couple of questions that I'd like to clarify. I'm sorry if I maybe missed this during our presentation, but on slide number 5, I was writing down notes. So the removal of $255,000 in CIP funding for Project 2-14-01. This is the installation of a traffic signal at San Gabriel Boulevard and Commercial,
Correct.
as required for a nearby project.
Correct.
Which was actually completed some time ago. And is the removal of these funds, or the de-appropriation of these funds, because the developer has already put enough funds on deposit? No.
No, this was, the project actually came before you at the last council meeting, and you approved it then. And we had already put it in the document, so because you approved it before you approved the budget, we had to take it out of this document because you just approved it 2 weeks ago.
So, but then will that signal actually be installed?
Yes.
Oh,
And the project will be in the document. The funds are all there. It's just you adopted it 2 weeks ago, so we couldn't adopt it again because then we would have adopted it twice. So it'll be in the final document as adopted, just not adopted tonight.
I see. It's the reference in the staff memo about the de-approval of a double item or something like that.
Correct.
Okay. Let's see here. And then bear with me. On page 5 of the staff report, the fiscal impact. Now, I compare this back to what was presented in the draft operating budget, and the numbers are different. I'm wondering what's the reason for that, because in the appropriations and transfers out column, the special revenue funds shows 20.7 million, whereas that was only 15.3 million in the the previous document, the draft operating budget on page 1. So what accounts for that? And because optically this looks like we're appropriating and transferring out more than what we're receiving, because the total number there, that $5 million makes a difference, right? Because in the draft budget document, we have looks like it's a balanced budget where the revenues and transfers in are exceeding of the appropriations and transfers out, whereas this shows appropriations exceeding the revenues. So can you explain that?
Yes. The front section of the proposed document that shows the $15 million was wrong. It was actually $20 million we had left off, or I had left off the CIP amount of $4.3 million.
I see.
So if you look at the numbers within the document, they were the 20 million.
Can you say the number again for total CIP appropriation?
In the original, in the proposed document, it was 4.3. It's been reduced by that $255,000. If you take a look at page 2 of the budget message,
yeah,
it shows the 20 million there under the total.
I see.
problems when you're trying to put a document together so quickly.
Okay.
And they wouldn't necessarily be balanced because they are special revenue funds, so you've been accumulating the funds and now spending them on capital projects. So you accumulate the money in gas tax or Measure R or Measure M, any of that money, and then when you get enough, then you spend it on the project. So it's typical that you'll spend more out of the special revenue funds than you're bringing in, as long as you have a good beginning fund balance. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. I think, for members of the public, we have, how much is the total balance of all CIPs? Somewhere in the 20-some million dollar range. I think it's in this document here.
The funded portion or the total budget?
The funded portion.
The total budget was, sorry, all my numbers are running together now. Oh, I'm sorry, I have the slides.
Is it this one? The
Yes.
25 million?
$36 million.
26 million. Okay. 36 million. Okay. Because just optically it looks like, and I wonder if there's a way of providing some explanatory comments in the city manager's cover letter, because at the same time that we're talking about a general fund deficit, this looks like we're still spending more than we're not making, but than we're receiving, which would be irresponsible. And I think that from a public information point of view, we should explain how some of those funds were appropriated or that funding was accumulated in past years, and we just happen to be expending it for certain CIP projects now.
We will certainly do that.
Okay. Because I think actually too in this cover document, I think it's worthwhile to sort of have that explanation and maybe a brief summary of the newly funded CIP projects in the current fiscal year. In the operating, I know these are two separate budgets, but most members of the public, they're not going to go, they're not going to go read this and then think to themselves, oh yeah, I've got to go read this too. You have to be a crazy council person to want to do that.
We do have a section in the operating budget for the CIP that details a lot of the information in there.
Right, that's right, this overview. I wonder if that can be moved up, because these are basically just the two components of the budget. It's the operating budget, you have to get to tab 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in order to see this capital improvement program overview.
We can certainly do that. We just didn't because it has its own document that stands alone. But if that's what you would like, we can certainly do it.
I mean, I feel like that's more transparent, and would make that an even easier document to read than when somebody picks up this operating budget right off the bat. They can read this budget summary or what's it called? The budget message, and then look at the CIP summary, and basically get the full picture of what we're planning on doing with the funds for the year. Okay. that's all that I have. Anybody else? So, question for the city attorney. Do we need to do any of these resolutions in any particular order? Can we just take them all as one motion to approve recommended action?
As long as you identify each action, which I see the city clerk has described it well in the title, then you can adopt them all together.
Okay. So I'll move approval of the recommended action with some, formatting and content changes to the budget message and in the proposed operating budget as described. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Costanzo. There's a motion and a second. Let's vote on the board.
Motion passed by a vote of 5-0.
Okay. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you.
And the next item.
Item 6, new business. Item A, project review, Pacific Square mixed-use project, plan development agreement, tentative track map, and precise plan of design at 700 to 800 South San Gabriel Boulevard. Planning case number PD 18-001. Applicant Pacific Square San Gabriel LLC. Assistant City Attorney Pilchin will explain the parameters for this item, and presentation will be made by Planning Manager Tracy Steinkruger. There we go.
May I, Mayor Pooh?
Oh, yes, please.
So this, just an announcement to the public that this item is not an action item. It is merely a project preview to describe a pending application, and there will be no decision making by the City Council. All information provided tonight on this item is tentative and subject to change, and in the future, public hearings on the project will be noticed in accordance with state law.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. Please proceed.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the Council. Tracy Steinkruger with the Community Development Department. This evening, staff is providing a preview of the Pacific Square mixed-use project at 700 to 800 South San Gabriel Boulevard. There we go. The subject property is located on the east side of South San Gabriel Boulevard between East Grand Avenue to the south and East Almonte Street to the north. The San Gabriel Nursery and Florist occupied the site from the mid-1920s until just recently in 2016. San Gabriel Nursery and Florist continues to operate just north of the project site on an approximately 2-acre parcel. In 2018, following an act of arson where many of the greenhouses and related structures were either damaged or destroyed entirely, the project site was largely demolished. However, some building foundations, trees, and landscaping do remain on site. The property is located in the C1 or retail commercial zone and has a general plan land use designation of general commercial. The proposed mixed-use project would develop the site with 243 residential condominium units, totaling approximately 413,000 square feet, and approximately 80,000 square feet of commercial space on a 5.85 acre lot. 2 building plazas would be connected by a central park area with a combination of subterranean ground floor and mezzanine parking serving the site. The residential units are a combination of 1, 2, 3, and 4-bedroom units, and both plazas have a second-floor interior courtyard with a variety of outdoor amenities and landscaping. A fitness center and grocery store anchor the southwest and northwest corners of the site, with retail and restaurant tenant spaces interspersed throughout. In order to facilitate the development of the site, as proposed by the applicant, the following entitlements are needed: a plan development, a development agreement, and tentative tract or tentative parcel map. The PD, DA, and map would eventually be approved or denied by the City Council. The Planning Commission is only a recommending body. Should the proposed project be approved by the council, the development would be subject to design review or a precise plan of design by the Design Review Commission before proceeding to building plan check. In advance of submitting their planning application to the city, the applicant team initiated an early dialogue with the community to solicit feedback and input on the project. In May and July of 2017, 2 community workshops were held to learn about the development process, project sites, planning approach, and proposed retail strategy. The applicant has developed a website for the proposed project for meeting announcements, agendas, presentations, and summary notes. Additionally, the applicant has already conducted over a dozen stakeholder interviews and met with neighboring residences and businesses in an effort to solicit feedback on the project. In addition, the city has hosted the first in a series of meetings about the proposed project as part of the environmental review process. Environmental Science Associates, otherwise known as ESA, and Fair and Pierce Traffic Consultants have been retained by the city to prepare an EIR, or Environmental Impact Report, for the proposed project. A Notice of Preparation, or NOP, was circulated for 30 days beginning on August 29th of last year. 4 comment letters were received during the NOP circulation period, 3 were submitted by regulatory agencies, and 1 was submitted by a resident. Additionally, an EIR scoping meeting was held in September of 2018 here in City Council chambers. 19 people attended the scoping meeting to learn more about the project and the environmental review process that's forthcoming. In terms of next steps, we're focused on continued environmental review, internal departmental architectural and landscape review. We're anticipating right now, based on where we're at in the process, that an administrative draft of the EIR will be coming out to staff shortly for review. We circulate that to all the different departments for comments, and then we provide that back to our consultant team. And a public review draft will likely be circulated for review in August or September. That is subject to a 45-day public review period for the public and for agencies. We also, as part of that process, anticipate that that's when our next community meeting invite will go out to provide both an update on the project and solicit input on the draft EIR. In the meantime, for just this evening, our recommendation for the council is simply to ask questions that you may have, provide generic feedback, and review and file the report tonight. That concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions that the council may have. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Tracy. Questions? Anyone? Councilmember Leal.
Thank you, Mayor. So, yeah, this is one of the largest development project in the city of San Gabriel, and probably is going to be the most beautiful one. We just cannot wait. But why is the delay for 2 years since the last community meeting?
So the applicant held 2 meetings that weren't necessarily mandated of the applicant by the municipal code. I think in an effort to inform the potentially impacted public about the project, and also to solicit feedback about, especially about the desired retail strategy for the area. Then, as is common, the applicant team goes back, they work with their landscape architect, they work with their architect to put together a combined set of project plans, which admittedly we gave you tonight a condensed set. There's a much larger set that's sitting downstairs in my office and is with our environmental consultant team. That takes a great deal of time and energy to put together. They submitted that to the city in mid-2018, and then the city starts the process of putting together our early comments, staff comments, architect comments, our city architect comments, city landscape architect comments. We sent out an RFP for the environmental review work that needed to be done pursuant to CEQA, selected a consultant team, got them rolling. So there's kind of, I think of it as a snowball that's slowly rolling down the hill and kind of picking up momentum and size. We'll get to kind of a sweet spot here very, very soon when the environmental document is circulated to the public. That is the next point in the process where it makes sense to do some outreach with the public, because we've got a refined project both in an architectural sense, and we've also got an environmental document that needs to be reviewed and commented on by both the public and by a variety of local, regional, and state agencies that are definitely going to want to see it. So the next big opportunity for public review is coming here in the next couple months.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Councilmember Costanzo.
Thank you, Mayor Pooh. Tracy, on the May 4th and the July 5th public and community engagements, do we know how many people showed up at each one, approximately?
I just saw 50.
50, okay,
About
that's a
50
good turnout.
people.
My concern was the 2 dates were picked that could be considered holidays, Cinco de Mayo, May 5th, so we had, and then July 5th, where a lot of people may be out of town. So I just want to make sure that when we have these community outreach meetings, that they are done on dates that we'd have the majority of people attending, but 50 is a good count.
Anything over 5 is a great turnout from
Thank
my
you.
perspective.
Vice Mayor Menchaca.
Yeah, I also wanted to comment on the community meetings. I'm glad to hear that there's going to be another one, since it's been 2 years, maybe 3 years by the time you're at that sweet spot that you mentioned. And possibly, definitely evenings, but even during the day might be something to consider, because there is an audience during the day that might be more willing to participate. But one of my questions is, what type of restaurants are they hoping to attract? Because I saw the fitness center, I saw the grocery market, so but I saw also restaurants. Are there anything in particular that they're targeting, or just generally, what kind of restaurants are we looking at?
It's my understanding that it's an even-keeled mix of chain, non-chain. Anything beyond this, I'd probably want to defer to the applicant team, because they can speak better to the retail strategy than I can. I don't know, I'll defer to the city attorney on this, if I can invite the applicant to come up and speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I see no problem with that.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mayor Pooh, members of the council. My name's Ken Lee. I'm the Vice President of Development for Pacific Plaza Premier Development Group. And trust me, I had a conversation with the owner today about the fact that it's been 3 years since they purchased the property. So we are anxious to hit that sweet spot. I will say that a lot of our early energy and effort was actually spent on the retail strategy. We took a very unique approach of bringing in a listing broker at the outset of the project, even before the design was even conceptualized. And so the reason we did that, and I'm getting to the answer, is that a primary focus of our retail strategy has been on the anchors themselves. So when we talk about the fitness center and we talk about the market, those are the anchors that will bring in the other tenants. This will be more of a daily needs type of retail center. And so when we do look at kind of the mix of food type of uses, there will be a broad mix. We don't anticipate there to be a lot of sit-down restaurants. They're kind of a dying breed these days. But we've talked to some different types of food uses like Chipotle and some along those lines as well. So maybe a mix of those types along with potentially a coffee shop, along with a bakery and some other uses as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
And you may want to stay there. The next question is, our next, the project that should be already in play is the Symphony project. So, that's a corner that's going to be completely changed in a very short period of time, actually. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to know, have there been any conversations between yourselves and Symphony? Because there could be some opportunities to work together and kind of make sure it all comes together correctly.
Rick Abe, who's also been our project design architect on this project, is also available to talk about kind of the design compatibility of the two uses and how we evolved the design with the anticipation of the Symphony project. I will say that from a coordination standpoint, I've had a multitude of conversations with Rich Coors, who's the project manager for the Symphony project. We've talked about how we not turn our back on Gladys through our project, make sure that we have connectivity from a pedestrian standpoint along Gladys and through the project, both east-west, north-south, ensuring that the public space that we see in the center of the project is also providing a point of connectivity and continuity with the Symphony project and some of the landscaping that's there. If it's okay with the council, I would I'd like to invite maybe Rick up to just make a couple of comments about just the design aspect of the connection between the two projects.
And if you wouldn't mind, maybe just mentioning the park, because you have a park in play for your project, and then Symphony, I believe, has some open space also. And I'm just kind of curious if there was any connection there, or...
There is, and I'll
Okay.
let Rick go ahead and address that point.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Rick Abe. I'm the design architect on the project. And what I really appreciated about the strategy of how we went about the planning and the eventual definition of the architecture was that that there was significant research done, both in terms of the retail and the uses that we wanted on the site, but also the context of how this project will sit within the boundaries of what's around it. So the Symphony project that you mentioned is really significant in two ways. One is it adds to the strength of what we are proposing in terms of a mixed use by extending the residential, the Olson project next to it, and so forth. We feel that the way that we defined our project, which hopefully as we develop the design and we show you the development of that, that will make even more sense. So how we develop how the residential and the retail kind of combine together, it relates directly to the Central Park, which you mentioned. The idea of having this this planned strategic connection between San Gabriel Boulevard and the residential along the back side. If you notice in the site plan, the Central Park actually aligns with the existing crosswalk, which works off of Pearl, and it also works with the open space that the Symphony project has. There's an existing grove of trees, very mature grove of trees on the Symphony project, and our Central Park actually aligns with that. So there'll actually be a visual terminus to the Central Park, to that open space. It'll terminate in the visual grove of trees that exists on the Symphony project. So that's kind of symbolic to me of the planning that's gone into it and how it relates to the things around it.
Great. And so along those lines, has there also been some collaboration with regards to the traffic circulation? Because again, it's that area is going to be quite developed, and you know, there'll be a lot of egress and ingress from Symphony, but mostly from your project. And so just would like to know what kind of talking has there been about
a lot.
it? Okay.
A lot of talking.
I hope so.
And that actually is probably, we highlighted this in your staff report, that's a work in progress, and I think we can all see that changing, the prospect of that changing from now until when you see it again. We're looking specifically at the number of ingress and egress spots that are proposed as part of the project along the perimeter of the site, taking into consideration the development that exists, the development that will likely come to the table between now and when this project starts construction, and how everything will coexist when everything is fully operational. And that's really been a collaborative effort between the applicant team, our traffic consultant at Fair and Piers, and our public works staff. And we're not only looking at traffic circulation, ingress, egress, but also parking, how loading and unloading will occur with a grocery store tenant that obviously is going to have a respectable number of deliveries and some large truck traffic, and how all that's just going to interrelate in that area.
Okay, good. And let's see. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Harrington, have anything?
I wanted to actually start with the city attorney. I know we had discussed keeping the comments general. I just want to know what types of questions we can ask. I've gone through the design and some of the presentation, so I have questions specific to the presentation itself. I didn't want to go too far into it if this is just a presentation.
Right, right. Well, I'm not concerned about questions. So it's more opinions that I'm asking us to be careful
I think
about.
questions kind of lead to what your opinion is, depending on the type of questions you're asking. So I don't know if a question would qualify as an opinion.
Yeah, it's hard to say in the abstract, so.
Well, just tell me if I'm starting to give opinions then. I see there was outreach done. When that outreach was done, how far along was the project? So did it show like the size of the buildings? Did it show the height? Did it show, or was it just say, in general, saying this is what we want to build?
That's an excellent question, and it actually gets back to the timing question of why it's been such a long time. If we had done the outreach meetings later on in the design process, it really would have been less effective and impactful in terms of how we evolved the project. And so when we first brought the project to the dialogue with the community, all we had was a basic, more bubble level diagram of the site plan of proposed uses. And it really focused on what would be on the ground from the perspective of the layout of the retail buildings, as well as a focal point on the public space for the park.
So did it show anything like massing
No.
or anything like that?
No.
Okay, so to me that's, the outreach really hasn't been done other than this is what we'd like to build, like the type of units we'd like to build. Is that correct?
Correct. And I think that was a valid point about the value of coming back and closing the loop with the community in terms of explaining how we took the early input and incorporated that into our design to where we are today.
All right, so just
I was going to add really quick, sorry. As part of the scoping meeting that was done when the environmental kickoff started, that's when I think the public that attended, and there were only about 20 attendees, admittedly, that's when the public, I think, got the first kind of taste, if you will, of the development parameters associated with the project. Unit count, square footage, max height, elevations, renderings, and since shortly after the plans arrived in our office, they immediately went up on the city's website as well. So for interested parties, they've been available for viewing and download pretty much since they showed up on our doorstep. So certainly the public has gotten the opportunity to get a peek, but there's more outreach to be done, absolutely.
And the reason I say that is because I think back in April when we did this, was it San Gabriel Square?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I forget the address.
220.
I think my same comments would apply here after just looking at the concept. I would really like to see the fire department's input on the height. I mean, I don't know whether we're able, if we're relying on mutual aid, and let's say there's a regional event like we just talked about disasters, we had our CERT team in here. What happens when when we have people that are disabled, there's a fire recall, they're not able to use the stairs? Are we able to do a rescue on 5 stories?
So the project's been circulated to all city departments, including the fire department. We have cursory comments back from each department. Because this was a preview item tonight, we didn't include all of their comments in the staff report this evening, but they'll come forward as the project evolves and as part of the environmental review process.
I think that's just a general comment that I have is for me it's difficult to get my head around. There's going to be people on the 5th floor and 4th floor that are probably not able to get themselves out in a major like regional, like an earthquake, or maybe there's a fire and it happens to be Monterey Park's tied up, Pasadena's tied up, and we have no hook and ladder. I mean, what do we do in that case would be my question to the fire. I mean, I had the exact same question under the previous development. And I think that goes back to why our zoning is the way it's written. By right, what can be built. Mm-hmm. If we do a mixed use, it basically doubles the FAR. We go from we go from a 0.5 to a 1. So by right here, under mixed use, full, without any added decision making, this wouldn't even come to the council. I think staff could do it if there were no planned development, none of that. So my thing is now the concept here says 1.96 FAR, which is 4 times what could be built if we didn't add mixed use to the original 0.5. So we really are kind of like, we're stretching it, and then we're stretching it again, and then we're adding massing, and then we're adding height, and we're doing it on every single project. And then the next person that comes along is going to say the same thing. Well, you did it on the last project, and you did it on that. Why can't I do it? And it becomes that, like I said last time, the chicken and the egg, where it's causing our real estate prices to go way up, and then they have to build more because the real estate prices are way up, and they justify, well, it doesn't pencil out, and if you don't do this, you're going to have all this blight. And I think it's kind of like, I want to step back and kind of think, I'd like to, on all of these projects, have the staff analysis showing council what can be built by right.
Happy to.
I mean, like maximum. And then that way we have a delta. What are we truly approving? And then what is the community receiving for kind of the give and the take of it? I really think that shows, and it shows to the public what we're approving, what the benefit to the community is, what the project brings to the community. I think that's just something that it's really nice to see an analysis like that, saying here's what the developer is getting, here's what the community is getting, and here's how it's helping everyone. It's not a one-sided equation. That's just something I'd like to see.
Okay.
I think I'm going to hold a few of my other comments. I think that kind of gives you the general idea of where the way I approach these types of developments. To me, I don't understand why we have a variance and we also have this. We have a zoning code, and we're kind of like, we could do a mixed-use development. Now we're doing a different type. So it's like, it kind of just adds by the way, the council can always approve anything as long as the council approves it. I don't like zoning like that, me personally, so. Thank you.
Thank you. Just writing down some notes. Please bear with me. Okay. So I just had some clarifications. Looking at these various site plans, is it correct then that the residential courtyards are situated above the parking structures on both sides?
They're either above or flush with, basically.
Okay. I'm seeing Ken nodding his head yes. And have there been discussions about community benefit in terms of the different types of categories and sort of ballpark number?
I think the most I'm prepared to say this evening is any discussion has been in very big, broad brushstrokes. We're looking at the same kind of categorical areas that the project at 220 South San Gabriel or the Symphony project we're certainly subject to. But again, the benefits that would be required of the project need to be commensurate with the degree of flexibility that's requested from the zoning code through the PD process that exists in the code at present. That's something I imagine will continue to get fleshed out as the project moves on.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think I do agree with Councilmember Harrington to the extent that ultimately when it goes to planning for recommendation and then before the council, we do need to be able to see what those trade-offs are. Then I had a question. Are there currently any EV electric vehicle parking stalls being required, or at least maybe a requirement that the conduit, because I think that we actually have a rare opportunity if projects are being constructed around the city to be forward-thinking and forward-looking. It's a hell of a lot easier to install the charging stations later on as long as there's the conduit from the main line to facilitate that. But if we allow the parking structures to all get built without that, it'll cost millions and it just will never happen. So I'm wondering if there's been conversation about that for this project.
Absolutely. So the current cycle of the California Building Code actually requires a certain number, and there's a formula for number of parking stalls that will have to be, they call it EV ready, which is basically running the conduit and getting it prepared for a charging station. We then have the ability through the PD process, as part of one of those community benefits, if you will, to request the presence of charging stations beyond that. But right now, the building code does require a percentage of stalls be EV ready. The next building cycle is coming up very, very soon. And we're anticipating that the green building code will probably be ratcheted up a little bit even more so, to make that a requirement, maybe not just that they're EV ready, but the charging stations be there and ready to go. I know also too, the applicant has already demonstrated a willingness to incorporate those into the project site. We just haven't quite fleshed out the details because we don't quite know what the building code's gonna look like yet in terms of what's mandated, and then what we might ask for beyond that as part of the PD process. But certainly that is a requirement and a commensurate benefit that we're talking about.
Great. And when is that new building code going to be promulgated?
I think it takes effect next year, but please don't quote me on that.
Is that right?
Next year? Okay.
2020? That's normally for like about a 3-year cycle, is that correct? Or?
Yes, and I think that's actually, the building division will be bringing that back for adoption to council at some point later on this year.
Got it, okay. The other thing I wanted to ask about was, you know, in line to a certain extent with some of Vice Mayor Menchaca's questions, is about rideshare drop-off and pickup. If there's been any thought provided to when or if there's going to be a specific location of the project that would facilitate rideshare pickup and drop-off, because I think that's another element of planning for the future where, you know, if you have a bunch of cars or a bunch of Lyfts and Ubers dropping off on San Gabriel Boulevard, it's going to jam up traffic on San Gabriel Boulevard. Whereas if there's a designated area, maybe on the backside on Gladys, that, you know, it could actually help alleviate some of the congestion, at least on San Gabriel Boulevard. Not saying that it would actually help, because as has been noted, Symphony was going to be on that backside, but that being a senior care facility, we don't, you know, other than visitors who might be visiting their elderly relatives, you know, wouldn't expect necessarily a lot of those residents, you know, zooming around in Maseratis or things like that. So, so I just wanted to ask about the rideshare, you know, because in places where I've been, where there's a dedicated location for that, it really helps. It makes the pickup and drop off so efficient, and then that even helps to reduce the need for parking. Not that I'm saying that we would reduce the parking requirements, so don't get your hopes up there. But then you know, it kind of helps to alleviate the parking issue.
So it was like you were in our meeting we had a couple weeks ago. That is actually something that we've been talking about too, is dedicated spaces or some sort of dedicated loading unloading zone for rideshare vehicles or pickup drop off for Uber Eats, Grubhub, you name it, all the different apps that are out there. What we're working through now is just trying to figure out where the most appropriate spot is for those spaces, whether it be on the perimeter of the site or within the interior, and also in relation to any of the truck loading and unloading for one of the anchor tenants.
Great. You mentioned something that I didn't, you know, that I didn't mention, which, you know, perhaps will become more of a trend, which is like the Uber Eats or Grubhub type of thing, which is the drop off and pick up too, which hopefully, if these the restaurant uses that are brought in are popular enough, then you know, we will see some of that kind of activity as well. The last question I had goes back to other conversations that we've had, which relates to the public art component, and specifically if conversations have been had with the Yoshimura family for the potential of doing a public art portion that helps to honor the family. As noted in the staff report, they have continuously occupied this site for almost a century now. And they have a rich family history too, being interned during World War II. and being able to still retain, the nursery and the site. I'm curious to hear an update on that.
So I'll start, and I'm going to invite the applicant to come up to speak more. We do have a condition of approval that we've put on both the Symphony project and the project proposed at 220 for a public art requirement that's based on the kind of assessed value of the project. And there's a formula that we use that a lot of cities employ when they're assessing what is expected in terms of public art and how much money should be invested into it. That will apply to this project as well, we anticipate. I'm going to invite the applicant to come up and speak a little bit more about where they're headed.
Thank you, Tracy. We have had conversations with the family. They're a family that has a long history. They're also a family that has a lot of humility. They don't want anything extravagant. But we have talked about us relooking at our landscape design to look at possibly more of a passive type of homage to the prior use and to the family to some degree. And I think what we'll be doing is continuing that dialogue with them. We have a good relationship with them as we move forward. And I think the other thing that I will just point out is that on the Gladys side of the project, as we are not wanting to make the project either cold or to turn its back on Gladys, we are also in discussions about how we can provide some additional treatment to the backside of that building so that it provides a bit of more pedestrian scale and engagement with the community. And that could include some potential type of application of design elements as well.
Okay, interesting. And when you talk about this, continuity with the community, I mean, it's not just Symphony, but it's also the Olson Mission Walk, project. Just like 88 residences there as well. So I guess is it anticipated then that residents, both of these newer projects, would be patrons in the commercial areas of this project?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the more, direct outreach meetings we had was with the HOA for Mission Walk. There were some additional residents that attended, and there was a lot of excitement about the project, particularly in terms of the potential retail uses and the open space area.
Thanks, Ken.
Sure.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Actually, yes. That kind of brought me back to thinking about our last conversation on the Sheraton regarding the assessed value. And the report says it may be apartments, it may be condos. The developer hasn't decided yet. So my thinking was, if it's going to be apartments, how long are we going to be waiting for that tax revenue to come in? Because on the assessed value, we're going to be waiting for the developer to fight the county on the assessment. So I don't know. I just kind of popped the assessment that triggered that for me.
So typically in terms of assessed valuation, it's based on construction value. When the project is completed, the property will get reassessed. The value of the property upon completion of construction won't matter actually whether it's for sale or for rent. We will spec the residential as a condo regardless. And so what I'm saying is that the construction value should be pretty much the same regardless.
Well, my point there, I think let's say if you did a condos, you're going to have to subdivide, right?
Correct.
And each one will be assessed, and the new owner would come in and fight. Not necessarily fight, you can't do it on that, but if it's an apartment, you could battle the county for a long time as far as construction value versus if they assess it higher than you think it should, and you maintain the fact that you're the owner, you probably aren't going to agree on their assessment because they typically they're pretty high.
Sale value.
Yeah, the sale value is what they would be looking at.
Taking me back to my financial consulting days. But my understanding is it would almost be a rolling reassessment. So it'll get reassessed upon completion of construction. And if there are condos, then as each unit is sold, that will be a separate reassessment.
So I understand. I'm talking from the city's perspective, not from your perspective, because as long as you're contesting,
I'm saying from the property tax.
If you contest anything, that money goes into the county fund, and the city doesn't receive that. We receive what we would have. I mean, that's my understanding, correct? So I'm just worried about that. If it goes to apartments, if it goes to condos, it's no big deal. They're just assessed, and it is what it is. Yeah. But if it's, that's kind of something our staff needs to look at. And I'll just go back to my reasoning of why I like the analysis of what can be built by right. The reason I say that is if you go back to our zoning code, we could build about 255,000-ish square feet, split 50-50 between commercial and residential. Am I wrong on that?
Actually, so right now as it exists on the ground, there are 26 separate parcels.
Yes.
Very, very little.
Yeah, you can see them when you did that.
Yeah.
There's a million little parcels.
So technically, if we did by right zoning on each individual parcel, taking into consideration what all of the setbacks and the height limits are with the C1 zone.
Well, I'm assuming we could join them into one property. That's an assumption I would make.
It is an assumption, absolutely. That would require, though, some sort of discretionary entitlement, though, at least that would go forward to Planning Commission. So it's not truly by right.
Well, I'm taking that step. I'm assuming that we want that one piece of property treated as one. We don't want to treat it as 27 separate properties. So I'm taking the 255,000 rough plus minus square feet of 5.85 acres. By right, if you took that one piece of property, it's basically 50% commercial, 50% residential, which is 125, a little more plus minus. And this proposed project is 413 and 79. So that's why I talk about benefit to the community, because the community benefits from the commercial. Community doesn't benefit from a bunch more residents there. That's where I'm talking, we gotta balance that. The code is 50-50 for a reason. And then now we're doing this overlay, and it's kind of like, if we're gonna give more density, I would like to see that maintained if possible, or at least closer. Because we've dropped from 125 to 79 on the commercial side, and that's really not benefiting. That's where I'm talking about with staff to engage the developer and say, why are we going so out of whack on that?
I think when the property was for sale, almost every inquiry that we received in the planning division about the project site, the prospective buyer assumed that the lot would be consolidated into a single parcel and that a PD would be pursued. Not one person or prospective buyer we spoke to, I think, had any intention of doing a by right project, whether it be because the numbers didn't check out from a mixed use perspective, or something that we also heard was that they couldn't find tenants for that much commercial square footage. Whether that's still true today, I don't know. That was just some of the feedback that we got at the time. I think if the council as a whole is not interested in pursuing the density levels that are routinely being requested as part of the plan development process, it may warrant a broader policy discussion as to whether or not the plan development process should even exist in our zoning code. If it is simply something that the majority of council members do not wish to entertain, we do not, as staff, want to communicate to the development community that there is an option and a process that takes multi-years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to go through that may not meet with positive results.
So I'm not saying I'm against that.
Okay.
I mean, it's in our zoning. I just want to make sure it stays more relative, because right now we're going whoop,
and if
the
that's
community's getting the short end of that.
And if that's again the opinion of the majority of the council, maybe we need to look at the possibility of creating some sort of parameters for the PD process. Those certainly do exist in other communities.
Thank you.
Yeah. Certainly that would have to be a discussion for, a fully agendized item. My personal sense is that that's not the case in terms of the majority of the council, but, if it's something that Councilmember Harrington would like to have agendized, we can do so sometime in the fall.
Yeah, and I'd at least like to see what other communities are doing, because other communities have it built into their zoning. I mean, every zoning code is different. You go next door to Rosemead, it's different than ours. I mean, it's just
absolutely.
And so that's something that the comment that rings with me is developers are assuming. You shouldn't have to assume when you're buying property.
Oh, I don't. Okay.
Because staff doesn't have the ability to say yes or no. They can only say they can speculate.
Right.
So if I'm purchasing property, I mean, granted, all real estate is speculation. But you can't speculate on decision making. That's a whole other level of complications. That's just my point. That's my point. I'd rather have a more defined code and get us out of these discussions.
As you know, our code hasn't been updated in a very long time. It would cost a tremendous amount of both time and money to do so. In the absence of having the funds and the time to go through that process, this is about as as effective and efficient as we can be. I mean, just a note on Rosemead. I mean, they're actually trying to they're trying to copy us, right? They have put in place a Garvey Boulevard specific plan that is not just reminiscent. It even goes further than our Valley Boulevard specific plan. But in any case, I mean, I think it's fair to at some point have a study session that just shows, you know, within the region, what are some of the various planning tools that have been adopted. I think Arcadia, for instance, just increased the density of their downtown area to 75 DU per acre, way more than anything that we have in the code by right. In any case, that would be, you know, for a future topic, and I'll work with the city manager's office to see when this is an appropriate time, since we do have quite a lot of other things to get through in the immediate short term. So, if there are any other questions? Good, because thank you very much to staff and to the developer for bringing this preview. I feel like having this part of the process ultimately makes things, you know, smoother and more efficient. And for bigger projects like this, I think it's appreciated by both the council and the community to get a sense of, you know, what's being planned, what's being thought of in these large sites. So, next item, please.
Item B, Memorandum of Understanding between the Drug Enforcement Agency and San Gabriel Police Department. Presentation will be made by Police Chief Harris.
Mr. Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, members of the council, good evening.
Good evening.
Before you tonight is a recommendation to enter into a memorandum of understanding between the Drug Enforcement Agency and the San Gabriel Police Department in efforts to combat crime associated with illicit drugs. Crimes associated with the illicit drug trade present a clear and present danger. The direct effects of which are murder, money laundering, assaults with firearms, gang activity, and property crimes. The indirect effects of the illicit drug trade also include increased burden on medical services, increased incarceration, mental illness, and overall societal decay. The proposal before you is to assign one San Gabriel police officer to the Drug Enforcement Agency's Los Angeles High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Task Force. The purpose of this assignment is to attain additional resources for the proactive effort of curbing the criminal activities associated with the illicit drug trade in San Gabriel and the surrounding areas. Staff recommends we enter into this task force pursuant to the attached memorandum in your package. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Chief, for that succinct staff presentation. Any questions by council?
Yes.
Councilmember Leal.
Thank you, Mayor. So I guess it was last month, you know, in front of a police station, there's a drug take back program, and I met two federal agents. I guess they're already working with the city of San Gabriel, right? Is it?
We work with our federal partners on many different fronts. The drug take back program is a federally adopted and funded program. We work with the DEA and agencies of that office to ensure that that program is managed properly and that it's accounted for. As you might imagine, having people drop drugs off at a police station and then having to account for all of that, making sure that not one pill goes missing, is a big task. And so we work with those partners in that endeavor. So yes, sir.
So what are they going to do with those drugs that they collected?
Most of them will be destroyed. They'll use some of it for training, but for the most part, it is destroyed. We're sometimes getting drugs that are aged or aged out. They're no longer good. Sometimes we're getting things in those bottles that weren't exactly what originally came in those bottles. So sometimes they have to, take that into account. But more often than not, they're destroyed if they're not disseminated for training, such as canine training, etc.
Okay. So, as you understand, in San Gabriel Valley, a lot of pharmacies being robbed or broken in at least 5 times. Each one of them, 5 times they've been broken into. And the whoever that, I think there's an organized, group that's trying to target all these pharmacies. And the specific drug that they are interested is called Flanagan Coiden, whatever. It's the cough supplement, and also it's a drug. Okay, I found out, the cost for pharmacy is $11, but they can sell in the black market is $2,000 per bottle. So who will buy $2,000 cough syrup for $2,000?
Well, there's a couple elements to that. First, you have to go back to what illicit drugs mean. Typically, when you hear illicit drugs, we commonly think of cocaine and heroin and those traditional types of drugs. But nowadays, the new trade is really trafficking in prescription drugs. Prescription drugs are expensive, and people are trying to find a way to bring that via black market to the street and reduce those costs. And so it's only $2,000 to whoever the drug dealer is. It's much cheaper on the individual basis or a pill-by-pill basis for the end user. And all of those are part of the existential black market that creates that clear and present danger that we spoke of. The drugs that you're talking about, those that are really dangerous, fentanyl, which is 100 times more potent than morphine, is the one that is really currently creating all of the deaths and serious injuries for the drug addicts or people who may be in need of assistance. So fentanyl and other opiates seem to be taking over the market. MDMA, which is the scientific name for ecstasy, is another of those that is really big in this area. Anytime you see a rave or any of those kind of things, if you happen to see an adult walking down the street with a pacifier in his mouth, he's probably got some MDMA on board. But all of those are things that need to be taken into consideration with this team that we're about to form.
So all these, store owners, the pharmacy owners, they have concern, because they've been robbed time after time, and each time they lost maybe $100,000 worth of drugs. So is there a prevention? Is there a way? Because they already put the iron gates, they put surveillance camera, they put safe in, is there another way? I kept telling them maybe follow the bank, example, put some kind of a 911 push button at the office, because right now what I've heard is when they have a strange looking customer walking to the store, they have to run out and scream, because that's how kind of, it's. I think they're just too worried, about this situation. But I'd like to see this, because the LA, what do you call that? HIDTT? Yeah, HIDT. It covers not just LA County, LA City, but also Riverside, San Bernardino, and Orange County, because a lot of these drugs were sold in Riverside and San Bernardino County, right? One time, I remember maybe a year ago, they stole the drugs from our San Gabriel pharmacy, but these guys were caught in Riverside by the Riverside policemen. So I think it's a good cooperation, but however, I think we have to think about these pharmacy stores owners for their safety, because it's just, I don't know, I keep telling them, well, maybe hire body.
Councilmember, maybe we should stay focused. I'm asking if we could stay focused on the
Yes.
agreement.
So this is, I'm just saying this is a good program, but however, we have to work with everyone. Last question. So if you want to assign an officer to work on this job and all they have is like 25% of the whatever overtime, right? So do you have officers that are willing to take on this task?
Yes, sir. We do. And the benefit for us, if you do the cost benefit analysis, is that we get access to resources that we would otherwise not have access to. And so there's going to be a trade-off that I think we are going to be the beneficiaries of. That 25% is beneficial, but we also have some equitable sharing opportunities and certainly access to technological advances that can help us in that mission that you're talking about. The drugs do not know geographical boundaries. The drug dealers don't recognize those. I think probably the best way to deal with some of that crime is through engineering solutions that we can get by working in this framework. The other is to lower the price of pharmaceuticals. That's outside of my wheelhouse, but that might help too to reduce the need. But engineering-wise, working with this group will give us an opportunity to kind of try and slow that in the city of San Gabriel.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, to quote President Trump, who knew healthcare would be so complicated? Councilmember Costanzo.
Thank you, Mayor Pooh. Chief, I know it's getting late. I just need a better understanding of, I understand the federal budget cycle begins October 1st and then goes to September 30th. I'm not quite understanding why we have to backdate the contract. I mean, go ahead.
I think that's really more a matter of semantics than anything else. They run through their budget year. We want it to reflect that we've been working on this for quite some time. It doesn't, I guess, adversely impact us to be entered into that particular point of the contract. Maybe the city attorney can comment on why that happens on a fiscal year, but it doesn't impact us adversely, is what I'm told by the folks that put the staff report together and the people that we're working with. We want to try and keep it consistent with.
Will we be getting reimbursements going back there? Did we have officers
We
working?
did not.
Okay.
So it has no practical difference whether they want, the DEA wanted the date to show that way, and it doesn't harm us in any way.
It keeps the paperwork simple. It doesn't harm us in any way.
Thank you.
I think the legalese is an effective date, because backdate has kind of a connotation that's bad. It's legal. It's like it's an effective date.
It's the federal government.
Councilmember Harrington?
Yeah, I just had one question. What type of training are officers that involved in the program? Are they going to receive special training, or is that another benefit we're going to receive?
Well, one thing first we have to have is an experienced officer. It specifically asks for an officer who's been through some specific training that will allow them to hit the ground running. So it has to be somebody with prior investigative experience and skill. And so when we put out our interest, only took people who were significantly skilled at what these folks are looking for. And it gives us access to all federal training, typically through the state, through POST, the Peace Officer Standards of Training. We send people to state training on a regular basis. If you were to kind of balance that out, kind of like you were doing in the previous presentation when you do the technical term, you do that one?
Perfect.
The federal ability, the federal dollars and the federal training capabilities and abilities and resources dwarf that of the state. And so this person will actually have access to that, so that is a benefit. But there will also be some required training that person will have to get for a lot of different things.
And that's kind of what I was thinking is if we have officers involved in this program or in this task force, then they're going to have opportunities for training they would never receive if they were just stuck.
Absolutely. Another tertiary benefit to that is that not only will the officer that's assigned get the training, but being a part of that task force also opens doors for the rest of the department to get training that particular task force may offer. Back in 1997, I think it was, I was assigned to the DEA Task Force Southwest Border Group 1, and I was there for a year, and it was one of the most intense but rewarding assignments that I've ever had. And you get the opportunity to come back better than you were when you left, and we bring that information and all that training and all of that back to the agency, and it just exponentially increases our ability to serve the community.
Yeah, I think it's just institutional knowledge that'll never leave our department. Once it
Absolutely.
spreads to all the officers, then they'll all have that.
Absolutely, and it's really hard to get into this particular task force because they have a finite number of slots, and so you have to ask and ask and ask, and I had my staff constantly contacting their contacts to see if we can get in, and one day it opened up, and we said, let's grab it, snatch it up. And so that's the other piece, is that once you get somebody there, you're in unless you want to leave. That's typically how it works. So getting in on the ground floor is really a good thing for us.
Thank you. That's fair.
Yeah, real briefly. So, my understanding is, we've been short 3 officers for a while, but for budget reasons, we haven't been able to, hire to get back to those numbers that we had in the past. But having this officer, there is a tremendous benefit, but we're losing them. But I wanted to know, was there any other downside? Because it sounds like it's a win in general, but what is the downside of participating in a program like this?
I think it's a matter of perspective. I really don't see a downside for us because of if you're keeping it in balance, we get more than we give, in my opinion. The access to those resources is something that you have to be in the game. You have to be in it to win it, kind of like the lottery, right? So in order to get it, we've got to be the equitable sharing piece. Although that's not the primary reason why we want to be in this task force, it is a big deal to have access to potentially millions of dollars in resources. So it really is an upside for us. Having a person go to this task force for San Gabriel Police Department isn't really a downer because we had somebody assigned to outside task forces in the past, and we managed that manpower and the staffing. So as long as we appropriately manage the staffing, I don't think there is a downside, to be quite honest.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Chief. Yeah, I share the sentiment that this is a really great thing, both for the department and for the city and community. So I wanted to just clarify and understand the staff report says that we'd be eligible for personnel reimbursement. This is, page 2, near the bottom, just before the recommendation, last paragraph before the recommendation. So allow San Gabriel Police Department to be eligible for personnel reimbursement and resource acquisition through asset forfeiture funds. Does that mean that the salary of this officer would potentially be reimbursed through asset forfeiture?
No, I don't believe asset forfeiture can be used for salaries and benefits, so that's not actually what that means. But should we need to apply resources to particular events and those kind of things, I believe there's funding that would be available to staff some of those issues on a temporary basis, is how it used to work. I can verify and get a better answer for you on that one. But if my recollection serves, let's say we have something that's a really large agency problem in the city. For instance, Monterey Park participated in Operation, the name slips in my mind right now, where they were downtown in the Garment District. You might have read about it in the news. Mm-hmm. Well, they had to bring in a whole lot of resources behind that, and the federal government paid for those resources to come in and deal with that particular incident. So although you can't fill staffing and hire bodies behind it, they do offer opportunities for you to have those resources brought there at somebody else's expense other than San Gabriel.
But by resources, does that include, that would include personnel?
Yes.
And so if a large contingent of San Gabriel police officers were required for a task force for an operation,
yes,
then it could compensate for that staff time.
Yes, much the way that you saw in the fires and some of those other elements where they put it out. Santa Monica does it a lot during their concert mm-hmm. season and that kind of thing. They have to bring resources in to solve problems, and they end up funding that on a reimbursement basis.
Okay. Because I was wondering then. But then above and if I understand then correctly, above and beyond the 25% of the annual salary for overtime, there's not a direct reimbursement from the DEA or federal government associated with this contract.
Correct.
Okay. Let's see here. The purchase of I take it Section 5 of the agreement is where is this provision then of what we just talked about in terms of access to resources, so to speak. Is it? subject to the availability of annually appropriated funds for any continuing resolution thereof, provide necessary funds and equipment to support the activities of the DA special agents and the SGPD officer assigned to the task force?
Yes.
Okay. But this seems very limited just to, that particular officer. In other words, I don't know if it's purposely vague or if it's just, I'm being too, nitpicky about it, but that element of it, that, as you've said, getting what more than we give, because we're basically using city funds to fund an officer, pay salary and benefits for an officer to be a DEA agent, which is, like I said, like all the reasons you've outlined, it's a good idea and a good deal for us. I just find that that portion of it being eligible for the for these additional resources, that portion of the agreement is somewhat quiet and or lacking. But anyway, I don't know if you care to comment on it.
It's the federal government.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I will, we should call up President Trump if we feel we're entitled to something. Yeah. All right. That's it. I think that, there's nothing, I'm sure there's nothing we can do to negotiate the agreement or anything like that. I just wanted to make sure I understood exactly, how this would operate for us from a fiscal perspective.
I don't want to offer up more than I need to. Sometimes I'm told just be quiet, don't offer up things if you don't have anything constructive to say. But I think this is constructive in that I think sometimes that ambiguity gives us some latitude. It allows us to have asks that we may not have been able to consider at the beginning of whatever the process is. Mm-hmm. And we have those asks that we can, hey, we need this, can we grab this? And it's one of those things that you can fit in after the fact because the ambiguity allows that open door. So I think there are some of those things that will allow us to get there. Training, equipment, and some of the other things that we have access to through the federal government will then become available to us that you can't spell out in detail in each one of the lines on the contract. So that's been my experience.
Understood.
I'm sure there's probably an opposite or equal, reaction to that, but yeah. I think we get the benefit of that for the most part.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I would agree with you in this case for these kinds of things. So, any other questions, comments? I'd like to move approval of the recommended action.
Second.
Okay. Motion second. Let's go to the board.
Motion passes by a vote of 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Next item, please.
Next item 7 is the second public comment period.
Is there any member of the public who would like to address the City Council? Mr. Richter. Please remember you're limited to 3 minutes. 3 minutes. And I've been sitting here.
30 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, name's Doug Richter, Mayor, Council, and guess my main question is towards Mark. Now, I've been hearing a lot about the budget all night, and one thing that didn't come up was a survey that was supposedly done in the city. Since I was one of those called, I was wondering if we ever got the results, and if we did, is it good, bad, or 50-50? That's it. For the tax measure, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I appreciate the question, and that was going to lead into my city manager's report. So it's like we're on the same wavelength. So we did have a conference call on Friday. I did, and received the information. I will say it's generally good news, but not as good as I would have hoped. We are trying to schedule a session with the City Council to present those details so that we can all hear them as nitty-gritty as you all want to hear. And your information will be one of 387 other people that will be in that survey. And I'll be looking for council to provide direction on how to move forward at that time.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. That's it.
Conclude your report. Okay. Next item.
Council comments and conference and meeting reports.
Let's start over here with Councilmember Harrington.
Since we're going into closed session, I don't have anything tonight.
Okay. Vice Mayor Menchaca.
Yes, I was contacted by Helen Romero from the Southern California Gas Company, and she would like to do a presentation and hopefully have a model resolution from council regarding having a diverse energy solutions. There is a movement out there of maybe just relying on a single energy delivery system, and we as well as other cities are looking at possibilities. And she would like to be here for a presentation, and at that time council could decide if we would like to move forward on having a resolution on just energy solutions.
Thank you. If there's no objection, I feel like we can certainly schedule that kind of presentation. Councilmember Costanzo.
Thank you, Mayor Pooh.
Yes.
I attended a meeting on Monday with Jennifer Kwan. Most of you know her from League of California Cities. So she gave us an update of some of the bad bills and the good bills going through our legislature. So I made a copy for each of the council members just to take with them this evening. Secondly, I know our agendas have become fairly full, but I would like on a future agenda conversation about our San Gabriel Historical Association. I think it's one of our treasures in the city, and I think oftentimes we put it on the back burner as not paying attention to it. And I think it needs some of our care and concern and thought as we move forward with maybe future budgets. So it's something that I would, again, like to see on a future agenda, please.
Okay. No objection. That can also be agendized. Absolutely.
So I attend the League of California Cities, and we did talk about the good bills and bad bills. One of the league doesn't support is Skinner's bill, and regardless of the size of the project, it does not require any parking at all. Okay, so that's something that we have to watch out for, because after SB 50, there will be more bills like that. Well, back to the energy balance, energy policy. I think this is what we need, because just relied on electricity alone, I don't think that's reliable and affordable, because I mentioned that before, and gas company did secure 45 cities passed this resolution for balanced energy. And since I'm on this transportation policy, the governor wants to take away SB1 funding. However, the state legislator, they did not agree to that. So what happened is we still keep the SB1 tax money, but for the future, they want to reform the RENA number. And so, the 6 cycles, I think we're in 5th cycle now. For 6th cycle, we probably will receive much more of, low income and very low income units number. Right now, I think it's 935, but yeah, it just reflects the situation in California. But another thing is, because the gas tax is declining, so there's a proposal for road charge. So it's like you have like a meter. Wherever you go, the meter follow you, and you will record how many miles you drive, and most likely will be charged like 5 cents per vehicle mile. But again, this is still in the pilot program, so we'll wait a few years to talk about it.
Okay. Thank you. I realized that I hadn't even reported out on ICSC Recon, which happened last month. So I just want to do a brief summary for the council, which I thought, I still think that it was productive for us to be there, and in fact, this sort of smaller format maybe even works even more efficiently than the larger number of individuals being present. I think we spoke to a couple of new retailers, which I think were pleasantly surprised to find out that we actually meet their demographic specs and so forth. And it was also productive from the standpoint of meeting with. At that point, we got a chance to talk with Ken Lee at the Pacific Square and advise, or I don't know if it was his request or staff's request, but out of that came this preview meeting that we've had this evening. And there are other unanticipated benefits of just being there, which is just like, being there and networking with various businesses or other cities, even comparing notes as to what they're doing, what the best practices are, that kind of thing. So on the whole, I thought it was productive and time well spent. It's been a busy couple of weeks, so let me quickly report that last week, or on the 7th, as you know, there was a meeting at Caltrans. I've updated the council with via email on this. This was with respect to the stubs of the 710. Now that the completion of the freeway is all but dead, there's still a remaining question as to what to do with the south stub and the north stub. There are plans, being proposed by the city of Pasadena and the city of Alhambra to actually do away with the stubs. However, the option that was adopted by Metro and then subsequently, ultimately by Caltrans, actually relies upon the stubs and will actually even expand upon the stubs. So, for members of the community who are still here at this late hour, rest assured that they're not going to be going away. And in fact, as part of the current plan, they will be actually even expanded. And Caltrans is making the point that not only does the set of projects that was ultimately adopted rely upon those stubs, but also that SCAG's air quality goals relies upon those upon the use of those stubs as well. So there's maybe more than one way of staying on track here with the fact that the stubs would still continue to be used, because Alhambra's plan was to cut it off at the 10, thereby diverting all the traffic right on the 10, which is without having done the studies, Caltrans at that meeting was already saying that they would be disastrous for the region. So you can understand there was some consternation, but rest assured, companion corollary note to that is that bills at the state legislature, one being sponsored by Portantino on the Senate side and another by Holden on the Assembly side, need to be amended so that those stubs would still be included as part of the regional transportation plan and remain in the highway codes, because they propose to actually remove them. There are scoping meetings being conducted by Metro regarding the East Side extension. For those of you who don't know, the Gold Line is really intended to be a sideways U shape. The northern portion of it runs along the foothill communities. That portion has been all but completed at this point, although there's still some debate depending on funding as to how far east it will go. The southern part of that U is meant to be somewhat closer to our community, and but now there's also an idea that it would actually just run almost diagonally southeast along the 5, rather than as originally planned, which would be more along the 60 and therefore more accessible for us as a community. So and then there's talk about actually funding both, but then the question with that is then which one is going to be built first, right? Because even the route along the 60, if built, would not be completed until 2040. Which really doesn't really do us a lot of good. But I just wanted to, let the council know and reiterate for the council that we need to stay involved in these conversations. Billions of dollars are being spent, and it would be nice if we had some remotely accessible transit, for us, since we are a transit poor community. Lastly, I just want to say that I've attended the Teleku Gala, which is always a glamorous event at the JW Marriott. That was really nice. Yeah, it's pretty, it's almost like attending an entertainment award ceremony for the Latino community. And then also the ELAC Gala last Friday. It's their 75th anniversary. Both events were very, very nice. And with that, we will take a, let's say, 5 to 10 minute recess before reconvening in closed session. Thank you.